set by that international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. The fascinating things about this, Doug, biggest exercises since the Cold War and China's involvement as well.
Yeah, and those two headlines really go side by side. Let's start with what's going on here. Why the biggest? Why do you have to go back to Ronald Reagan in 1981 when the Cold War was top of his priority list? Why do you have to go back to that to find anything even remotely similar? Well, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that relations have been slightly sour lately between Vladimir Putin's Russia and Europe and the U.S. And they really took that sort of tailspin, I'd say, after the annexation of Crimea. Russia's aggression in eastern Ukraine. All of these have added up to a sense that a lot of wariness, a lot of distrust about the other's motives. Vladimir Putin has looked very warily at what he perceives as NATO's aggressive buildup on its Eastern European flank, what you noticed, talked about. And it's true that NATO has deployed more troops, more equipment to Poland, to the Baltic states, in a bid to perhaps have a shield against what it sees as more Russian aggression. Vladimir Putin, basically, with these exercises, he is responding. He's basically responding with defiance. He is showing, we see your threat, what he perceives as a threat, and we up your ante a little bit. We are ready to see down any potential threat to us. Now, let's be clear. Moscow denies, despite what you said, 300,000 Russian troops. That's a third of Russia's available army, okay? All of those tens of thousands of armored tanks, Russia denies these exercises are to prepare for any large-scale conflict. But what they do say is they are a reflection and coming amid a time of they're a part of the international climate, the tension right now, at a time when they say they are frequently the targets of aggressiveness, where the West is being unfriendly towards Russia as Russia sees it. So it is a show of force. And as one of the Russian General Army Chief of Staff says, it's going to include massive airstrikes, cruise missile training, defensive and offensive operations, raids, bypass operations. It's going to include all of the things you associate normally with if you were to have to fend off a large-scale military conflict or operation.
China involved here then, Doug, invited for the first time. What's Putin's strategy then?
This is a remarkable headline. It's almost like you can't put it in enough boldface. Look, right? No, when I say that, not to just be sensational. It's true for a century, for decades, Russia and China were traditional adversaries. They share a 4,200 kilometer, a 3,000 something mile border. They clashed repeatedly. Russia's always been wary of China as a competitor, wanting it to encroach on its vast Siberian territory. And here they are, cooperating militarily. Well, look, it's part of a pattern in recent years, and it goes hand in hand with what I was just saying. The tenser international climate with the West, with the U.S., has sort of brought Russia and China closer into each other's orbits in not just military cooperation, right, which they are doing today, but also in the areas of trade, of investment, of energy cooperation in oil and gas projects, all of that. So it's part and parcel of a broader sort of rapprochement between these two powers, superpowers, which have been very wary of each other, but now perhaps both are even more wary of the United States. That said, even though Russia's cooperated with China, even though China has thousands of troops as well participating in 900 armored tanks and other equipment, I suspect there's still an element of wariness in there still, that Russia still looks at China as a potential competitor, probably doesn't want to give everything away. Some of its troops are going to be training and doing their exercises far from the Chinese troops.
Comes just as well, doesn't it, as the US has been launching exercises in Syria. I mean, that was reportedly
Right.
in response to a Russian threat there as well.
What's going on there? Last week, you had the deployment, you had Russian military exercises in southern Syria, and what it was in response to reported Russian threats, Russians saying that they were going to be entering territory in southern Syria near a base where the U.S.-led coalition is based and has operations. And it was in response to that threat that the U.S. started to conduct its own large-scale military exercises around the base at Antonov, and basically trying to publicly saying they want the Russians to see for themselves, look up into the sky and see just how ready the U.S. would be to see down any potential threat. And it also comes, let's not forget, after the Russians had deployed their own flotilla of warships right off Syria's coast in the Mediterranean, and at a time, as we're all waiting, perhaps any day now, imminently, for a potential Syrian offensive on Idlib, the last rebel-held enclave in Syria, with the Russian and Iranian allies. So a very tense climate there. What's going on in Syria, part and parcel of this broader equation that helps to explain these giant, unprecedented military exercises, which are taking part in the east of Russia across the expanses of Siberia as well.
The view there of Doug Herbert, our international affairs commentator here on France 24. Thanks, Doug.